Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. In today's edition, I want to talk about the riders and the staff, managers, DSs out there. They're all trying to take pressure off the riders. Even the riders themselves are trying to take pressure off what the expectations are for them coming up in the following races when we're talking Dauphiné, Tour de France, and any race they show up for. We see it all the time. So up here on Beyond the Coverage and the Butterfly Effect, what my channel is all about is coaching, analyzing the racing, and I like to take the BS out of some of the interviews that you guys are reading so I can bring you a little more truth into what's happening. When I woke up this morning, there's two interviews that popped up on the web. Cycling News had Matxin, he's the director sportif over at UAE Team Emirates. I rode with him not once, but twice during my career, once with Lampre, and again I rode with him with Sonier Duval back in 2005 when it was my second return over to Europe. So I know Matxin a little bit. The second interview, I wanted to talk about Remco Evenepoel. Remco Evenepoel's interview is much like Matxin's. They're almost identical. One's a writer's point of view, one's a director's point of view, but both interviews are BS, kind of. I mean, they're true. Everything they said in there, I agree that they could be true, what they're saying, but it's all about taking pressure off. So let's go over into Matxin from UAE Team Emirates interview first that I read this morning. And there he talks about Jonas Vingegaard is the big favorite. Okay, Jonas Vingegaard is the two-time Tour de France champion, so he's the big favorite. It's not a lie. But Jonas Vingegaard got done crashing on stage 4 of the Basque Country. A serious crash. Now I said, originally, way back there, 2 weeks after when he got out of the hospital, I said he can make the Tour de France. I still believe and hope Jonas Vingegaard will make the Tour de France. So when I look at the interview here from Matxin, he's not lying. He's a two-time favorite. But he had a serious crash, punctured lung, broken ribs, broken collarbone, 12 days at the hospital. Matxin, he is not the big favorite. We all know Jonas Vingegaard right now is not the big favorite. I'm not taking him off my list as a guy who can win. I have 4 riders. You guys all know who those 4 riders are. Jonas, Tadej, Remco, and Primož Roglič. Those are the 4 riders if you're just tuning in for the first time. Those guys any one of those 4 guys can win the Tour de France, but Tadej Pogačar has to be one of the outright favorites after winning the Giro d'Italia. We go back into that interview with Matxin. He's trying to take some pressure off of Tadej Pogačar. He's talking about how, well, he had a really hard Giro d'Italia. There was days when he burned 8,000 calories and he had huge high wattage. Well, of course he had the highest wattage. He was putting out remarkable numbers on the last climb on stage 20 on Monte de Grappa. There were fabulous numbers, I'm sure. So when Matxin says he did 8,000 calories on those days, on those hard days, not sure if he's talking about stage 20, but he probably is, doing 8,000 calories in the highest output, well, he might be fatigued. So Tadej Pogačar, he's saying, is fatigued after the Giro. But then later in the same article, it goes further down, he says, well, our whole aim at the Giro with Tadej Pogačar was to be economical. Be economical and get him ready for the Tour de France. So Matxin, was he out there doing 8,000 calories? Well, yes, he was still doing 8,000. Yes, he was still putting out remarkable numbers. Yes, they were still trying to be economical in some certain circumstances there at the Giro. But we all know when you win 6 stages and when you start going solo on stage 20 and you're riding 30 kilometers to the finish, it's not 100% true that you're being economical, but there's enough stages back there to make the article true still. So what Matxin is doing, like I said at the beginning of the video, he's trying to take pressure off of Tadej Pogačar, and director sportifs and other riders love to shift pressure over to other teams and other riders so that they can have a little more pressure going their way, so that when Jonas Vingegaard goes up at altitude training, like Matxin said in the very same article, he just got the altitude training. He hasn't been up in altitude training, but officially he has been there for a few days. So Matxin's, again, not lying to us, but it's not exactly accurate if you're Jonas Vingegaard and you just arrived up in teens to start some altitude training, that yes, you have been up there and Tadej Pogačar has not. So again, when you look at the articles, you got to read between the lines. Nothing in the article there from Matxin is really telling you anything that's factual other than Tadej Pogačar should absolutely have burned a ton of energies on Monte de Grappa when he won the last mountain stage of the Giro. There's no doubt about that. He burned 8,000 calories and he put out high wattage there on his power meter. So we know he could be tired after the Giro. He's not tired. How do I know? All we have to do is look at the Monte Grappa and look at the smile that's always on Tadej Pogačar's face. He's never up there suffering, grimacing, and he's crossing the finish line, always looking fresh as a daisy. Tadej Pogačar has left the Giro d'Italia, and the only truth in Matxin's article about him saying tired is that Tadej Pogačar mentally probably is tired from not being home for quite a while, always trying to stay focused, always switching from one victory to the next victory. Remember the 81-kilometer solo victory at Strade Bianche? Once he finishes that as a professional rider like Tadej Pogačar, he's already focusing on the next race, Catalonia. Once he wins Catalonia, and every day throughout Catalonia, he's always focusing on the next stage. You win, you cross the line, bam, you switch to the next objective. It's stage 2, it's stage 3, it's stage 4. He won multiple stages at Catalonia, won the overall classification, won the KOM jersey. Once Catalonia finishes, guys, it's not break time. It's switched to the next mode. It's LBL. Go into LBL, win LBL. LBL finishes, it's switched to the next mode thing. It's the Giro. So Matxin's article, again, when he says Tadej Pogačar is not tired, he's not tired physically. He's tired mentally of the drag of always staying clicked on throughout the 2024 season. And even at one moment when we look at Matxin's article and he says, well, if he was to win the Tour de France, it's not on his schedule to do the Vuelta, so he's not going to do the trifecta. But just because it's not on a rider's schedule to do the Vuelta doesn't mean he wouldn't put it on his schedule. We all understand how big it would be. So when you're reading again over there the article of Matxin, again, it's just ways of taking pressure off of the Slovenian Tadej Pogačar. Now, let's flip over to the article because Remco Evenepoel did a press conference this morning or yesterday, whatever time it was over in Europe. He did it. It was released out there. He thinks that Tadej Pogačar is the favorite to win the Tour de France, of course, and even says in there that he might just solo on stage 1 and then put everything in general classification out of reach. I don't see that happening with the type of quality field that we see, but again, when we're looking there at the article, Remco Evenepoel's not lying to us. When we go over and we look at his Strava stuff, I brought up on yesterday's Beyond the Coverage that he had some 450-mile weeks. He had a 350-mile week. He had a 530-mile week, I believe it was. But those aren't lies when he's posting those up on Strava. But when you go over and look at his personal YouTube videos, it shows where he says day 1 he's going out for his first ride after the accident of stage 4 of the Basque Country. And he's going out for a 3-hour ride. Okay, in that video, his own video on YouTube, he says, this is my first ride outside. He's not lying. It is his first ride outside. But if you had just crashed, most likely he might have a bunch of days on the trainer because you wouldn't just get on your bike for the first ride and go out and do 3 hours of training after you just got done having a collarbone issue at the crash on stage 4 of the Basque Country. He's clearly had some time on the trainer to get himself prepared and ready to go for that first ride outside. It is the first ride outside, but again, when he does the YouTube video, he's trying not to give away too much information, but he wants to, of course, make his YouTube video get more views and more excitement and stuff, so he can't lie to us, but he's not necessarily telling the truth either. And even in that same video, he's doing a 45-minute training ride with some efforts in there. You can see him sweating. You see his body temperature come up. Then he's going to have breakfast. Then he's going to go do his 3-hour first ride outside since his crash. And then after that, he's going to go over and do physiotherapy. So when we look at the Strava records that I listed on yesterday's Beyond the Coverage, and I'll list them again here today, where we see that he has 4 solid weeks of training. And I said yesterday, it wasn't big weeks of training. It wasn't anything. When I looked at his Strava stuff, I said, okay, it's not that big. It's 350. It's a 530-mile week. It's 2 weeks at 450. Those are not big weeks. But now if you were to say, hey, Chris, well, he had that plus an hour training on the trainer, plus a ton of time at the gym physio place doing some gym work and stuff like that. All of a sudden, I'm like, whoa, that was a serious 4 weeks, 5 weeks of training before you get in the Dauphiné. Now, why do I want to bring that up? Well, 4 or 5 weeks of serious training after you were already on spectacular form at the Basque Country. Then we go back into his press conference where he says, well, I'm going into the Dauphiné and I'm going to work for my other lieutenants. I'm going to work for Mikel Landa, and I'm going to work for Elan van Wilder. They're on form. I'm going to be a support rider for them. I don't know what to believe up here because if you're putting out 350, 450, and 530-mile weeks of training for 4 weeks before Dauphiné starts, I'd say that's probably true. He's going to go in the Dauphiné, and then he's going to just be here for training, get the rhythm like he says in his own article, of just getting the race rhythm back into your legs, be a support rider. I would believe that, but when I'm watching his YouTube videos and he's training an hour before he gets out on his bike, and then I think, well, maybe he's got an hour afterwards on his TT bike on some of the other days, or maybe he's got some interval training somewhere else. you don't know what to believe, but I do know, factually speaking, from Remco Evenepoel, I have yet to see him in the last couple of years when he's really been spectacular. Because Remco Evenepoel, man, you are spectacular. But I have yet to see Remco Evenepoel be a support rider for other guys on his team when we're talking pseudo quick-step. Maybe for Wout van Aert, when we're talking about the Road World Championships in Belgium and Leuven, he was an incredible support rider, regardless of what the national team rider said, national team DS said there at the Road World Championships. Remco Evenepoel was aces for Wout van Aert. But since that time, thereabouts anyways, Remco Evenepoel I've yet to see come into racing and be a support rider. So keep an eye out when the racing starts tomorrow on stage 1 of Dauphiné, of whether or not if Remco Evenepoel's got some form or not. We'll see if he's a support rider or if he's been holding a little something behind the belt so that he could take a little pressure off himself for this year's Dauphiné and of course the Tour de France that's coming up soon on the 29th. But one other thing I want to bring up, this is important. Let's back the film up just a little bit to Matxin's interview again, where he says, okay, Jonas Vingegaard is the favorite over Tadej Pogačar because if we looked at last year's crash at LBL with Tadej Pogačar where he broke his left wrist, he's trying to compare that as saying that was 3 weeks further into the season than stage 4 of the Basque Country this year. So he's saying Jonas Vingegaard crashes stage 4 of the Basque Country, but he has 3 more weeks more to recover before you compare it to the time that Tadej Pogačar had with a broken wrist. Okay, it's true. It's not really true because it's not 3 weeks, it's like 2.5. 2.5, another 3 or 4 days for Jonas Vingegaard. He would love to have that. Visma Lease Bike would write checks to get another week or 2 before the Tour de France starts under the belt there of Jonas Vingegaard. But, so it's not quite 3 weeks, it's 2.5 weeks. But the big difference, Matxin, between Jonas Vingegaard's crash and Tadej Pogačar's crash. Tadej Pogačar's crash last year before the Tour de France at LBL meant that he broke his wrist. Why don't you break your wrist? I broke mine when I was riding for FDJ in 1998. Was scheduled to do the Tour de France, had to fly up to France, had the surgery, had a chip in the bone here, had to straighten the hand out, chip it, put pins in here. Even with that kind of a break, I was still on my bike 10 days later, maybe 7 days later after the crash, and I left the hospital. And I spent 3 days probably at the hospital in Paris, if I remember correctly. It was 1998. I was a kid. Could have been 4. I don't know. But it wasn't that many days. It wasn't 12. So, Matxin, when you're trying to compare Jonas Vingegaard, and you're putting it in the article there for everybody to see, Jonas Vingegaard had a punctured lung, had 4 broken ribs, had a broken collarbone. Tadej Pogačar had a broken wrist. Guys, Jonas Vingegaard's crash, 100%, absolutely no doubt about it, is more severe and more damaging and takes longer to heal from than Tadej Pogačar's broken wrist last year at Liège-Bastogne-Liège. Do I believe Jonas Vingegaard will make the Tour? I believe he will because he is super professional. That kid is 100% focused on bike racing. Tadej Pogačar is 100% focused too. That's why he made the Tour de France after LBL. But Matxin, you can't compare those two. Jonas Vingegaard's crash is clearly enough to take him off of being the outright favorite at this year's Tour de France and bump Tadej Pogačar up to the favorite along with Primož Roglič. I believe those 2 riders, I believe, are the favorites right now for the Tour de France. Remco Evenepoel slightly behind. Jonas Vingegaard, he's got a little bit of a card to play right here, but is he one of the 4 favorites? Absolutely. If he can heal in time 100%, if he can get in the Tour de France, if he can survive the first week of racing at the Tour, I believe Jonas Vingegaard is absolutely a favorite. Once we start getting a little bit further past that first week of racing at the Tour de France, certainly past the first rest day, if Jonas Vingegaard has stayed with the 3 leaders in front of him, certainly the 2 favorites, Primož Roglič and Tadej Pogačar at this year's Tour de France, no matter what Matxin tells you, that Jonas Vingegaard will be an absolute favorite to come into the Tour de France once we get past that first rest day. If he's still on GC with those other favorites, we know Jonas Vingegaard's form has returned in time, and he's just barely made it, even with only 2.5 weeks of differences between Jonas Vingegaard and Tadej Pogačar's crash at LBL. So keep that in mind when you read articles. It's always about riders, directors trying to take pressure off of riders, riders trying to take pressure off themselves. Unless they have that kind of character that Tadej Pogačar has, where he's not afraid of pressure, he goes in there and says, hey, I'm going to come in here. This is what I'm going to do to you guys at Strade Bianche. I'm going to light you guys up. 81K from the finish. He did it. Boom. Tadej Pogačar is absolutely the favorite for this year's Tour de France. Regardless of doing the Giro beforehand, we know he left the Giro riding fresh. He's going to come into the Tour de France as the outright favorite no matter what Matxin says. Like and subscribe. I'll bring you guys the no BS stories here up on Beyond the Coverage, and the Butterfly Effect starts tomorrow for stage 1 of Dauphiné. See you guys real soon.